Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn at pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hello. And for those watching in real time, apologies for the slight delay in today's beginning. It's, that's my welcoming cough. It's Thursday. It's October 19th. And, things are proceeding as they have since the unthinkable happened. Did you hear that the hostage guy, the guy who was held hostage, and then with his pregnant wife, and then they had 3 children in captivity, and then they were recently released, that when he was told on his flying back to Canada, from whence he came, he was told that Donald Trump was president. And he didn't believe it. He thought whoever was telling him that was just having fun with him. And of course, that would be anybody's reaction. Anybody's reaction. And can you imagine, I put myself in his shoes, and then to try to come to terms, just like that, with, well, I guess it happened to all of us, but being out of the loop for 3 years as he was, and being told that the President of the United States is Donald Trump, you would think you'd fallen, into some kind of a hole, into an alternative universe. And the reality is you have, and welcome. We've been in it for a while now, and we're all still sort of in shock. And if you manage to climb out of your shock, every once in a while, you'll be, believe me, pushed right back into it by a tweet, by a news story, and I was able yesterday to distract myself for about 2 hours, a little less than 2 hours. I think it was the first time in a long time that I was totally in another place. And it was, I'm recommending it to you. I'm not sure how long it's still going on, but I had told my son I'm going to a play. Well, that's what I thought. I think it would have been more correct to say I'm going to a theater production. But even that wouldn't have prepared me for what I experienced. I have never in my life had an experience like I had last night, and I thought I was going to a play. This is Bricolage, that's the theater company. Bricolage is doing, and I do highly recommend it to anybody willing to have a bit of an adventure. I must admit I was a little apprehensive because when we got there, I could see immediately this was no ordinary play. You reported to a certain place, and people with not much of a sense of humor directed you to just sit there and we will blah, 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 fill this out. You're told beforehand that you'll have to surrender all of your phone, everything, and stick them in a locker. You're told to wear good shoes. I mean, good walking shoes. So right there, okay. It's called Dodo or the Dodo. I'm not even sure. Like the extinct bird. The theater where you go to experience this is the Carnegie Museum, where for all I know, they've got a dodo. They might. They have an incredible collection of birds, species. I don't know what to tell you, except that you experience this thing in a group of no more than 6 people. So that when my group of 5 finally emerged, you saw that there were 6 more people or 2 people or 4 people waiting for the next thing to start with them as it's not an audience, you're a player. But normally I would be so not willing to do that kind of thing. I guess it shows me I'm a kind of a control freak, and I don't want to mess up the potential for your enjoyment of the experience if you decide to go. But if you do, just jump online right now, because I don't know how much longer. Clearly, they do a number of these essential performances every night with a group no larger than 6 experiencing it. And sometimes you're by yourself. And you end up in parts of the Carnegie Museum that you've never been in. I was blown away by just seeing things that I had never seen before. I mean, literally, at times in where I don't understand how buildings are built, but places where only a custodian would ever go, where an electrical engineer might go, weird places. I ended up at one point, I'm just this one little giveaway, I ended up at one point in a little laboratory looking through a microscope. And I'd been given this, a little petri dish that looked like it had a bunch of pepper in it. And when I looked through the microscope, I saw that there were pieces of stone. It was pieces of stone and other things I couldn't identify. And the guy whose place this was says, look for the snails. And he'd given me this tiny little tweezers. He said, and take the snails out for me. Well, my God, I couldn't hand-eye coordination. I couldn't even get it was a piece of pepper, but you're looking at it, it's a fully formed, beautiful snail. I only managed to snag 2, but when you get it in the microscope and then pull it over here to drop it into this other dish, you don't even see that there's anything in with your naked eye, you do not see a thing. And then I would open the little tweezers, and out dropped a little teeny-weeny piece of pepper, which I had seen under the microscope was this beautiful snail. Don't ask me. I learned a lot. I saw a lot. I figured that the fact that it was called Dodo, that this would be about maybe extinction. And since the Carnegie has such an extraordinary display of things that now are not. But what's weird is when you get back out and you rejoin the people in your group, the friends you might have come with, and you start talking excitedly about the snail thing, they look at you like you're nuts because they didn't have that experience. They were off to some other place. So you have it's amazing. It's amazing. And is challenging in some respects, but I can't recommend it enough as a thought-provoking and different kind of experience than you've ever had in your life. You're in the Carnegie after dark. There's no one else there. At times you might be in a room all by yourself. Or you might be knocking on a door that's only about 4 feet high. and a guy on roller skates comes zooming by. I mean, it is bizarre. So I'm just telling you, bricolage. If you're afraid of the dark, if you're, don't like, I don't know, not knowing what the hell's going on, this is not the show for you. But I can't. It's one of the greatest theater experiences I've had. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Dodo, Bricolage. Make an appointment. It's $60. It's worth it. All right, back to the real world. Actually, that was the real world because we were looking at all these amazing things in nature, and we were seeing the impact of human beings on it. Oh, that reminds me, and Stephen reminded me. Yesterday I was telling you about the frontiers of public education in the U.S., of how To Kill a Mockingbird was banned at some Mississippi school because it made people uncomfortable, and how the great state of New Mexico was meeting to discuss whether or not to include the evolution and climate change in their scientific curriculum. The good news, and we find it very difficult to find good news these days, but Stephen reminded me, the good news is New Mexico backed away from the brink and has decided to say that in science classes taught in that state that the subject of evolution will be mentioned. I don't know how well they're going to teach it, and the subject of climate change will be mentioned. Okay. Well, speaking of science, I know there's so much to talk about. And guys, if I'm ever off and you're thinking, I wonder what she thinks about this or something, if there's a story, because I know there's so many possible stories that we could be talking about right now, just email me, okay? Lynn at pghcitypaper.com. Just throw it up there, and I'll be glad to take a stab at it, okay? I'm very welcoming of people wanting to produce, essentially, the content of this program. Speaking of science, there was a great quote in the article about that Washington Post article about the effort on behalf of a certain congressman from Pennsylvania, who then Trump nominated to be the drug czar, who now has withdrawn his name because of the article in the Washington Post and report on 60 Minutes, that he ushered through a measure that literally tied the hands of the Drug Enforcement Administration or agency to the point where it could not respond to the opioid epidemic. It couldn't interdict huge shipments that it was fully aware of getting into the pipeline and getting to people that are already addicted to their product. And there was a great deal of outrage over this. And one of the people in the DEA had called people who represent the pharmaceutical companies as drug dealers in lab coats. And I mean, yeah, that is what they are. Now, sometimes they got a drug that really is a helpful kind of a drug and is going to save a lot of lives. And sometimes they got a bunch of snake oil that might give somebody temporary comfort, but addict them and kill them and send their lives out of control. And that's what OxyContin and fentanyl and all that other crap, Vicodin, did and is continuing to do. All that to preface Nicholas Kristof's really strong piece today in the New York Times, and he starts by saying, the war on drugs. Any thinking person knows that the war on drugs has been the most abysmal failure of governance, one of the most abysmal failures. And yet, it's sort of like Vietnam, sort of like Iraq. We can't stop. I guess because too many people now are invested. And they would be found, I guess, having perpetrated a war, in fact, not on drugs, but on people. Such is the damage that is done. And he points out this, which you will immediately recognize as fact. Say there's a guy on the corner. He's dealing in the opioids. Not even heroin. He's handing out, he's got pills. And he's selling them, and he's making good money. And he manages to addict, just by himself, let's say 15 people whose lives he has started on or abetted, they already were if they came to him to start with, on a path to potential death. You know what we do with people like that. We get the cops, we pick him up, and we throw him in jail and tell him to rot. Now imagine the drug dealer is wearing a suit and tie, and they're peddling drugs to same pill, to hundreds of thousands of people by the millions, and they're making money too. It's lucrative. Do any of them get arrested? Do any of them go to jail? This is classic war on drugs. The little guy on the corner, who is so much not the big problem, is the one we target. The big boys go free. So the drug dealer in the lab coats, addicting hundreds of thousands of Americans, killing tens of thousands of Americans, they're called not a criminal, they're a marketing genius. They are given, who knows, a 6-figure bonus. The other guy's rotting in hell. He hooked 15. The guy who hooked 150, 200,000. Man, he's living the high life. So, pharmaceutical companies and their executives and their reps are responsible for making addicts out of regular, ordinary Americans who trusted that the pills they were given by their trusted doctors were going to help them, not kill them. Not send them off on a spiral in which they ended up losing everything. The trust of their family as they stole from them to get more drugs. Their jobs as all that became important to them was finding the next pill. Their lives, ultimately. More Americans have been killed in the last 25 years by these pills brought to you by the pharmaceutical companies and handed out like candy by your doctor. More Americans have died than died in Vietnam. and Iraq and Afghanistan. So greed kills. It used to be, he points out, that back up to the 1960s, somebody who got addicted started on heroin. For one thing, all these pills, the OxyContin and stuff, didn't seem to be there then. They got addicted to heroin. 80% of Americans who were hooked on opioids started with heroin in the 60s. Today, 75% of people who are addicted to heroin started with a doctor's prescription from their trusted doctor, filled at the corner pharmacy by their trusted pharmacist. Their addiction did not start on a street corner, in a dark alley. And he goes into what the drug companies, they're evil. There's an evil aspect to these people. They started front organizations. There's one called American Pain Foundation, which lobbied companies, and doctors' offices and legislators and anything about how dare you stand in the way of the hundreds of thousands of Americans who suffer from pain when we have the answer right here. They told doctors, they told everybody that these pills were safe, they were effective, and they particularly saw a lucrative market in returning veterans from Afghanistan. In fact, a lot of those who have suffered because of the opioid crisis are, in fact, veterans. Do you remember the first time you saw the ad? I know I mentioned it when I did. Had to be within the last year. An ad for a guy who's talking to a doctor, and because he's constipated, okay? And she gives him, "I got a pill for you, buddy." And it is a pill that we created just for this side effect you have from your opioid addiction. Because anyone who's ever taken one of those things, if you had a little surgery and the doctor gave you a bottle of pills, man, I've been given hundreds myself. I took one once. Constipating? My God! How can anybody tolerate it? So they hook you first, then you can't take a shit, and so they come up with a brilliant idea of peddling you another pill to help you take a shit because you're taking their pill, which is turning you into a drug addict. This isn't the definition of greed, insanity, evil, bad medicine. What? So he points out the drug companies here with the opioid crisis have the same essentially business plan as the street corner peddler. It's an old plan, and it won't come as a surprise. You get your customers, you get them hooked. You get them hooked so they keep coming back for more, and you are in gravy. That's what a street corner hustler does, and that's what the big pharmaceutical companies do, as well as own the Congress of the United States. Just last year, Americans received, get this, I mean, these numbers are mind-blowing. Just last year, Americans got 236 million opioid prescriptions. Guys, that is a bottle for every adult in the country. Drug dealers in lab coats. So, just to say, and Christoph points out, and let us not remember that one thing the Trump administration is doing, is getting done, is they're destroying regulations on industry, generally regulations that would keep us, the people, safe. Regulations that will make it possible that our water will get less safe, our air less safe, our workplaces less safe. And in regard to the drug companies, where we are already in jeopardy, even with the regulations that exist, Christoph suggests that if you want to see the consequences of deregulation or no regulation in regard to the pharmaceutical industry, you want to see the consequence. If you just want to unfetter these particular capitalists to have at the free market, you want to see the consequence of that? Just go to the cemetery. Oh, and here's what put me over the edge today. Here's what did it. After all of that, I read in the sports section of the New York Times, for the first time in the history of the most famous sled dog race in the world, the Iditarod, the dogs, some of the best dogs, the winningest dogs, have tested positive for opioids. So, the dogs, they've addicted the damn dogs to them. Can you imagine? I mean, I would imagine, yeah, their joints ache, their backs are killing them, they're dragging this stuff through the snow, they're going faster than anybody, and their owners are shooting them up with opioids. Several dogs on one team tested positive. Who knew? Dogs, poor little dogs on the Iditarod are subject to random drug tests. Yeah, well, at least they didn't make that choice, did they? God. Mark writes, healthcare navigator programs. Those are the people that help people who want to sign up for Obamacare, who help them sign up. Mark writes, healthcare navigator programs, which provide trained professionals to assist people with purchasing insurance through the ACA. Well, Trump has, yeah, you do know this, I assume. He has decimated the funding for these programs. Mark is saying specifically he knows this in Ohio. He's done it in every state in the union. They have no money. So they're not there. They're not even, and the reach out to let people know you can sign up now, that's decimated. So they're trying, the active sabotage by this administration to kick people off healthcare roles that they might have just managed to get on. Again, I don't know. What is the definition of evil? Taking candy from a baby sounds like not much of a crime when you think of taking health insurance away from people. So Mark says, funny, I heard that Obamacare was failing on its own. He also wants to point out that the University of Florida is spending $500,000, yes, on security because the Nazi, the alt-right leader, Richard Spencer, is coming to the University of Florida today. Mark says, I wonder what would have happened if the event was for, let's say, Malcolm X. And Mark's final thoughts are, knowing what to say to Gold Star families might be tough, but nothing compared to being a Gold Star family. The commander-in-chief cannot try to distance himself from the emotion of these deaths. He owes it to the men and women in the armed forces to be fully aware of the sacrifice he is calling for and the subsequent pain that will be felt. If he can't lean into this reality, he should resign. Well, please. It's mind-boggling. I can't even, I don't even want to go there. I can't even bear the conversation. And I got to tell you, have you noticed that when he goes ballistic and goes after people, how often they're black? Percentage-wise, it's got to be in the 80s and 90s. The fights he picks, the Twitter stuff, there are always black people on the other end. This black congressperson, this black athlete. Always seem to be black people. Aaron writes, I feel the same way about the opioids thing, and I'm a person with chronic pain. I have instructed my pain management doctor and my PCP to not prescribe opioids unless I am literally in the hospital due to being run over by a bus. Closely supervised while there, and then none given to take home. I know myself, and it's just a disaster waiting to happen. One point to make is that these types of drugs do work, and they work well for pain. If I were to say that they have no value at all, is probably not the best way to look at it. What the answer is, I don't know, but since regulation somehow, some has to be done. Well, obviously, the pharmaceuticals who are fond of telling us that our drugs cost so much because of all the research they're engaged in need to get back into the labs and find a better solution for pain relief. It was occurring to me, there are two things that medicine can't do. They don't know how to do without, in the case of pain management, hurting you further. They don't know how to do it. Another thing that plagues a lot of people that they don't have a clue how to deal with is something as simple as itchiness. It's one of their biggest conundrums. They have not a clue exactly why. They know it's the nerves doing something. They cannot. And some people would prefer pain over chronic itch, which is like torture, if you've ever had it. We can put a man on the moon. We can put a robot on Jupiter. And we can't help somebody who suffers from chronic pain without killing them, or chronic itch, something that people don't like to talk about because it sounds funny. So there you have it. Henry writes, if I could just change the topic a moment. We need everyone to call their state representative and ask them to pass a freaking budget. You're absolutely correct. We are already a third of the way into the fiscal year, and we do not have one completed. For college students who get PHEAA grants, they will likely have to go back to their borrowers, whether it's a bank or a parent, and get more money to make up for it. We are a dysfunctional nation, dysfunctional state. It's really something, guys. For colleges and universities, many are threatening tuition increases in the middle of the school year. The chancellor at Pitt did that, which is pretty outrageous. Because they aren't getting anything from the state. As usual, Wolf and the Republicans, specifically Senate Majority Leader Jake Corman, are at odds. It's petty. They play their political games while people suffer. I blame the Republicans. You know I do. Because since Ronald Reagan, their mantra has been the government is evil. And it must be shrunk. It must be destroyed. So they deregulate. They just want to hand everything over to the capitalists. And if they do pass legislation, it's legislation that is actually written in corporate boardrooms and then given to them. They want to shrink government to the point where when it cannot function, they then point to it and say, you see, it doesn't work. It is sabotage. They have sabotaged government. They have largely sabotaged public education. They are now, you see it working with Trump, sabotaging Obamacare. This is what Republicans do. They destroy. And then say, look. They don't say, I just pulled the wheels off that car. No, they pull the wheels off the car, and then they say, look, it doesn't work. Ugh. Okay, so here's something to worry about for the future. Trump's going to South Korea. You know that? Trump's going to South Korea, I think, next month. And he thinks he's going to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, where you can literally stare into the eyes of North Korean soldiers. And there's a lot of people in the State Department, in the Congress, in the White House, who are thinking, oh my God, we cannot let this guy go to the DMZ. What will he do? Now, some of them are worried about his safety if he goes to the DMZ. Personally, me, not. I'm worried about my safety. I'm worried about the safety of the people on Guam and in Japan, because that guy with his idiot head and his big pursed mouth could use the opportunity to say exactly, of course, the wrong thing. Just pointing it out. That's something coming to us in the very near future. And have you heard that there's this one Republican senator who hasn't been there for a while, Thad Cochran, I guess. He's 79 years old, and he looks 89. He's not in good health. He's been out for about a month, but man, They dug him up. They said, hey, Thad, I don't care. You gotta somehow, maybe we'll shoot you up with steroids or something, baby. But you gotta come over here to Capitol Hill. We need your vote. So this guy who has been in office for 44 years stumbled into the Senate this week. And let me just read to you a description written by a reporter who followed him around. This is a guy who came in to vote, a representative of we the people. Cochran appeared frail and at times disoriented. He was unable to answer whether he would remain chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and at one point he needed a staffer to remind him where the Senate chamber was. This is a guy who's been serving in the Senate for 44 years, and he couldn't find the Senate. He had to be guided by staffers around a security checkpoint inside the Capitol. He started to walk into a first-floor room, although the Senate chamber is on the second floor. He was then ushered by an aide up to the Senate, and when another reporter asked whether leadership had pressured him to return for a vote on the budget, he responded, "It's a beautiful day outside." He sat quietly in his seat during the lengthy voting session. On one amendment, he voted yes, despite being told by an aide, no, you want to vote no. The staffer tried to get the senator to switch his vote, but Cochran kept flashing the thumbs up sign, even walking over to the clerk, tallying the vote, and doing so. I don't know what the rest. Okay, so the rest of us. Even though staffers repeatedly were telling him, the leadership wants a no vote, no vote. Why the fuck do you think you came here? No vote, no. Several more moments passed before Cochran realized he was voting the wrong way, and then he changed his vote. I was in my car yesterday, and I happened to hear the press conference given by the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell. This is after he'd spent all this time talking to the owners and the players about the little problem they got about, the anthem. It used to be a little problem. That's before, of course, the great uniter, Donald Trump, decided that it was a cheap, easy way to make himself, again, the center of attention and to help divide the country a little bit more and to perhaps even take down the NFL, which he hates because they denied him years and years ago of membership. He wanted to buy a team. He had the money. He wanted to be an owner. He didn't get into the club. That happened to Donald a lot with clubs he wanted to get into, people who he felt looked down on him. Well, because they did. And if you remember that, it becomes clearer why he might actually be trying to take down the NFL. And they do have a problem. And what was interesting, though, is they did not acquiesce to the president's bullying. He told the owners, you force them to stand during the anthem. And Goodell came out yesterday and said, no, we will not. It was, I never listened to a whole news conference with him. He's a smooth cookie. He was very smooth. He was walking a hell of a tightrope. He often didn't answer the questions that were being asked, but he was finessing it left, right, and center. And he said, that it was important to understand what the players were protesting. And in fact, he says they're very eloquent about it. And so he put the NFL on their side about what they're protesting about and started talking about what I had mentioned the other day. I saw the video of him in Philly, where he spent the day with some Philadelphia Eagles players and people working in Philly for criminal justice reform. I got the video from the ACLU. I imagine the ACLU was involved too, since that is a major mission. And there was Roger Goodell at this news conference talking about criminal justice reform, about bail, about odious laws, he steered clear of racism, but that's what it's about, of course. And then the guy who heads the San Francisco 49ers saying, guys, the economic hit we might be taking from certain advertisers or even from fans is not as important as the underlying issues that our players are trying to get us to pay attention to. So, I don't know. The NFL, under extreme pressure from sponsors, from some fans, and one Donald Trump, stood firm, said no. I don't know where they go with this. The Wall Street Journal suggested they're trying to run out the clock. We have a call. Caller, hello? Hello? Caller. It's what? Hello? What a bunch.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, because I called twice before and nothing.
Not even a ring.
I got on, but I sat there, and usually you stop after a while. I figured, well, maybe I'll just wait, and then I just hung up.
Okay, well,
I don't know what happened.
something ain't working right
But,
again.
what I was going to say, I'm always amazed that these Second Amendment people are against the First Amendment. Wouldn't the First Amendment be more important than the Second Amendment?
They're all important, but yeah, the first one, the one that the founding fathers thought, you know what? We got to make clear that freedom of speech and assembly and all these really important things for human beings to feel free are codified in our Constitution. Yeah, it's number one.
Show me where in the Constitution or any law that says you have to stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. There's nowhere.
Nowhere.
And I consider it pledging allegiance to the flag, singing the Star-Spangled Banner. I don't feel that's patriotic.
No, not necessarily.
I feel patriotic, a person that's patriotic does it for the good of the country, and usually you don't even know they're patriotic because they do it, it's done and you don't know about it. That's how I look at patriotism. I don't know how you think.
Well, no, I don't.
I don't think rah, 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 and wow, the flag, and stand up and wave the flag. That to me is nothing.
It's nothing. It's cheap. It's grandstanding.
It's nothing.
It's like people who are always talking about Christian values and Jesus and this and that, and they don't in any way live the teachings of Jesus.
Yep.
I mean, it's just a big show. But they don't see it that way. These are simpler, maybe, people for whom that, and I understand that it can be a very powerful thing to stand with strangers and say, we are all on the same, team here. We pledge to this country. But when the country is as divided as ours is now, one can understand why some do not want to engage in that activity. You know, can you imagine how, if you're a black person, how you could like choke on the Pledge of Allegiance with your hand over your heart and actually end up saying at the end, with liberty and justice for all? Bullshit. Bullshit.
Yeah.
I can't say that. I know it's not true. So what? Being a patriot is standing up and saying things that are fucking untrue. They're aspirational. It's what we want the country to be, but we are so far away from it, it's a joke.
Let me ask you this. Who owns the stadium? Is it the owners or is the taxpayers own it?
Well, it depends. I mean, from stadium to stadium. Usually stadiums are owned by an authority, which is the people, essentially. Usually, taxpayers do build these babies.
The NFL's getting money from the Pentagon.
Yes.
For promoting this.
Through this patriotic stuff,
tax money.
Yeah.
So they're taking tax money, but yet we help them with taxes to pay for the stadium.
Right.
What's wrong with that picture?
Oh, there's plenty wrong with that picture.
Sense.
Well, but that's the way. Hey, that's the way the world works, baby.
I know.
The little people pay through the nose. The big guys walk away with all that's there to get. We pay, they take.
Then they'll tell the Pentagon will tell the budget, the Congress, that they need more money for the Pentagon. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a vicious cycle, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know either, but we're in, we're not in a good place.
So.
Thank you.
Okay, then. Thanks for listening.
Okay, good to hear from you, Joe.
We'll see you.
Bye. Dorothea writes, I was reading in the New York Times that prior to 2008, the teams didn't take the field until after the anthem was over. That is correct. Well, I think Joe just was responding to what that was. The Pentagon got together with NFL and said, I think we should, we'll do these jet flyovers for you. This was during the, Afghanistan and Iraq, and you're right. They didn't used to be out there. I've been going to NFL games since the 1950s. All of this is bullshit. There's an agenda behind it. And now, look, they act like some long-standing tradition is being flouted. Yeah. I don't know. We're just... There are so many issues, so many problems. Roger writes, doing business on local and federal government projects, my boss often states, I hate the government. I always ask, what other government would you rather work with? Canada? China? Italy? Considering proud Americans think we live in the greatest country of all time, they certainly do hate a lot about it. It's a good point. Considering proud Americans think we live in the greatest country of all time, they certainly hate a lot about it. And I would argue some of the most basic things about it, the very reasons I love it. It's a good point. They're just angry. Talk about spoiled brats. They don't see it that way. They're, they make fun of they when you say the word entitlement, they just see like black people wanting welfare, food stamps. The most entitled people in the country are white men. Roger says, I see a possible upside to Crazy Pants going over to South Korea and the DMZ. Can he take Pence and Paul Ryan with him? Pence was just there. He got all dolled up in a bomber jacket and stuff. Oh, God. The posing, the bullshit posing. If you really wanted to erupt yesterday, you would have watched Attorney General Jefferson Beauregard Sessions before a Senate committee refusing to answer any question, taking great offense when some of his former fellow senators said, hey, if you were sitting up here, you'd go ballistic if somebody was saying to you, as a senator, what you're saying to us now, which is you won't answer. I take offense at that, sir. And as I said, we live in a divided country. It's people don't see things the same. Here's some latest research from Pew. This regards men and women because of the sexual harassment story that we've been dealing with since Harvey was outed. If you ask Americans, do we need to do more to ensure that women have equality in this country? 2/3 of Democrats answer yes, we need to do more. Ask Republicans, less than a quarter. Less than 25% say we need to do more. Half of Democrats say men have it easier these days. Only 19% of Republicans say that. And you see it too, college graduates, 69% say men have it easier than women. 69% of college grads. If you didn't go to college, 27% of those say men have it easier. So that means over 2/3 of them think women have it easier? Excuse me, why my female voice goes into the upper registers. Jesus H. That's like having your cake, eating it too, and then saying, where's my cake? Great bank shot. Did you see that? Did you see my great bank shot? All right, guys. I can't take any more. I'm telling you, I've had it. Up to here. And then, last chance. It's just go online, go to Cooltix, COOLTIX.com. If you want to go to the party tonight, it's a biggie. Ace Hotel. It is a biggie. Ace Hotel. It's the best of Pittsburgh party. Unbelievable food and musical performances and people you may know or not, and all these restaurants that won best of. They're going to be bringing the food. What more could you want? Oh, right, a promo code that'll get $10 off your ticket. And the promo code is Lynn Cullen. Okay, just stick that in the promo code box. And have fun tonight. Toodles.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.